All right, we are live. This is a 3 Firetalk. It's annual National Health IT Week Firetalk. 2 years ago it was about workflow. Last year it was about the origin of National Health IT Week with Michael Gaspar, his social media program ambassador or manager. And this year we have Lars Brouwers from the Netherlands, who's an expert on using 3D printing in the surgical suite. And I'm inviting him right now. And then we'll kind of go over, I'll introduce myself, himself, and kind of lay out the structure of this Firetalk. And hello, Dewey, and hello, Joe. Thank you.
Hi.
We've got a good game here. Hello, Lars. How are you?
Hi, Chuck. How are you doing? I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, okay. We'll just. I'm an industrial engineer, interested in workflow. I went to medical school, but as an engineer, I was always interested in building things. So I'm on my third 3D printer, and I do a lot of social media. And I'm hearing a little bit of an echo from your end, so you might.
For me, it's okay.
To turn your volume down. Okay, sounds good. As long as it's okay for you. So I build little robots. These are for pediatricians to entertain kids. That was version, you can see it's like a shell. So all the electronics go inside and they're connected to the cloud and they're programmable and so forth. I give away things, key fobs, vendors I work with, and I turn their logos into 3D versions and give that, to them. And so that's just kind of, it's just, you use 3D printing for your own purpose. But I'm very interested in 3D printing in general, bioprinting, implants, the functional materials. That is, they're actually getting to the point where they can print a working transistor radio. That's the amazing stuff. Medical device prototyping. And anyway, so there was I was on a Firetalk with Dewey, I think, and then there was a Twitter. Associated tweet chat, and I think you showed up to that, and we had a wonderful conversation about sort of the need for research and evaluation of 3D printing in healthcare, and learned that you would be presenting in Vancouver at a trauma conference about your work in 3D printing in the surgical suite. And so I had the idea to invite you as kind of the official guest for the third annual National Health IT Week Firetalk. I guess the kind of structure of this is I've got about 90 minutes of tape, so to speak, and this can be replayed. And often more people watch the replay than actually show up to the actual thing. So, and what I try to do is be kind of pretty structured the first half hour, open it up the second half hour for folks. I know Joe Warbington is in data analytics and just got a 3D printer. I think some interesting, think about 3D printing visualizations of data. I think that's kind of an interesting idea. Dewey, I think, is working in an area, I think he interacted with you and me quite a bit about printing from CT scan data and so forth. We got a fifth person who just showed up. And then, so during that second half hour, folks can come in and talk about 3D printing. And then I just let it run. If you need to go, we'll be respectful of your time. But the last half hour of that 90 minutes, if anybody's around, it's just some kind of like old home week. Friends of mine who come to these repeatedly. We just say, well, what are you up to these days? So, okay, so Lars, could you give us kind of a brief bio?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. So my name is Lars Brouwers. I'm 29 years old. I graduated, I think now 4 or 5 years ago from medical school. and at the moment I'm a surgical resident in training, and I hope to be a trauma surgeon in about 6 years. However, I stepped out the clinic to be a full-time PhD candidate in the trauma surgery, because I really like to go some deeper into how do you say, in the into the medical science. And the last 2 years, I did my full-time PhD into research of the health-related quality of life of pelvic and acetabular fractures. It's not really about 3D printing, the first part, but it's of my PhD, but it's really more of health-related quality of life, because until now, all the trauma patients who are taken care of worldwide are only followed up by or X-ray or functional outcomes. So the surgeon is only interested in how many degrees your wrist can bend or stuff like that. And we think from our department over here, we think that that's not the way you want to follow up your patients. But the most important thing of the patients is the quality of life. It doesn't matter if you can bend 90 degrees. It matters if you can brush your teeth or do your hair. That's what matters. So for patients. So that's what, on the first hand, we're investigating that part of the pelvic and acetabular fractures. But on the second part, the most important part of my PhD is the investigation of 3D printing in complex fractures. And also a small bit of virtual reality and augmented reality with the Microsoft HoloLens, but it's only a small part. And so we started, I think, 1 year ago, and I should tell something about our hospital, because we are a major level 1 hospital. And for the people who are not into the medical world, you got 3 types of level criteria in the hospital world. Is level 1, 2, and 3 in trauma care. And level 3 is the lowest trauma care there is. There's only basic equipment for a trauma surgeon, and they're not there for 24/7. Level 2 is in between, and level 1 is the highest level of trauma care there is. There's a large neurosurgical department, and trauma surgeons are in hospital for 24/7. So our hospital, the Elizabeth II City Hospital, is the largest non-academic hospital in the southern part of the Netherlands. And our research group is, and our trauma department is especially good in treating of complex fractures and complex patients with, for example, pelvic and acetabular fractures. And therefore, we've got a lot of data we can do research on. And that's why we started with 3D printing, because the pelvic fracture and the acetabular fracture are really complex, and are really complex to do your pre-operative evaluation with X-ray and 2D CT. But I will explain later in this interview. And we thought that 3D printing would be really helpful of getting insight in the fracture, of getting to know how the fracture works, the understanding of the fracture. And I showed that with a large with a large study last year, but I will get into that later. And at the moment, we're just finishing our results and starting up some new academic work and some new research to investigate the cost effectiveness of 3D printing. I think that's a really important part of 3D printing as well. Yeah, I think that's a small introduction.
And it was a super introduction. And by the way, we were just joined by Manish from India, who's an enthusiastic health IT person who's interested in everything, including 3D printing. Okay, so I guess the folks here, I think, probably know or think they know what 3D printing is. But for the folks who might be watching this again, replaying it, give us a 30-second, 45-second, to a complete newbie. What is 3D printing?
You want to explain me what 3D printing is?
Yeah, just kind of for someone who doesn't know anything about 3D printing.
Well, that's cool. That's so as I always explain it, 3D printing is making a 3D a real 3D image. So you translate the CT into a real 3D image, and what we do is we melt plastic on a plate with an extruder, and the extruder will melt the plastic with layers of 0.2 millimeter. And after he's done with a plate of with a layer of 0.2 millimeter, the plate will go down 0.2 millimeter and will start over again, because we were printing with PLA. But of course, there are several other techniques. And PLA is polylactic acid. It's a kind of plastic which really good for melting. But you can also do 3D printing with with paper, with wood. You can with a laser. With you can choose whatever you want. But titanium, but it's all really expensive, and the plastic is the most cheap thing to print with.
Right, corn syrup, at least the PLA. So let me ask you. You have been known to say, I have the tweet that 3D printing is the most important thing since the internet. Why do you believe that?
Actually, I stole that. I must be honest. I stole that tweet from a neurosurgeon from Utrecht. Because the neurosurgeon, his name, the name of the neurosurgeon is Bon Verwij, and the Dr. Verwij is actually the first neurosurgeon who implanted a 3D printed skull and replaced the whole skull for a new skull with a girl in the academic hospital in 2014, because she had got malformation of the head. Was totally, the bone was still growing at the adult age. So their bone was growing, and they chopped off the skull and replaced it by a plastic skull. And you know, internet has changed everything so far, and I think with 3D printing in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to do the same. Because until now, you're going to the shop and you're going to buy your own toothbrush, but I think in 5 or 10 years, you don't have to go to the shop anymore. You just print your toothbrush at your own home, just like your own HP printer you've got at your home at the moment. It will be very easy to print everything, and it's
well, you know, I'm reminded of I'm thinking of like Star Trek and being able to instantly send an object from one part of the universe to another part of the universe. The internet gave us the ability to send data, information from one place in the world to another, but it didn't give us the ability to send objects, physical objects. But if you add 3D printing, and 3D printing is now much more than simply printing plastic figurines. In its potential, you're actually sending 3D objects, and so so there's kind of a complementariness or layer. Lars, if you look on the right-hand side, if you click on live chat,
there's actually a couple of questions. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've got Joe Warbington is saying, making a comment here, but he has a question. In healthcare, what is the most common filament type? Prototypes probably include PLA.
I think definitely PLA. Yeah, PLA or ABS.
What was the plastic used for the child's skull that you mentioned about 3 or 4 minutes ago?
I'm not sure. It was SLA or SLS printing, because there's a big difference, because PLA printing is plastic printing, and you can use it for the cheap printers as I'm using, and probably all the guys over here or ladies over here are using, but when you want to sterilize it, when you want to use it during the operation, or when you want to use it in the patient and to leave it in the patient, then it has to be sterilized. And probably we've all making the same mistake, unless I did, because I've got one of our printers is the Ultimaker 3, and the Ultimaker 3 has got 2 types. It's a dual extruder printer. So on the one hand, my first extruder is PLA, and the second extruder is PVA, and PVA is resolvable in water. So when you put your model in water, the support disappears in water, and the only thing that's left is PLA. But I thought, okay, maybe I can do it more quickly by putting on the hot water, but then if you use the hot water, the PLA melts as well. So you cannot sterilize the PLA. I found it per accidentally. However, you cannot sterilize it. So you have to use for example, the laser printing or the powder printing to sterilize the models you're making and to leave it in the body of the patient. Of course, you can use titanium as well, but it's much more expensive. Then we're talking about 20 or 30,000 euros per operation. It's about 20,000 US dollars.
I'm reminded of a panel. A couple of months ago, I went to the second annual 3D printing symposium on 3D printing and additive manufacturing symposium at the University of Washington in Seattle. And there are many conferences now about 3D printing, including increasingly medical 3D printing. I believe there's one in Germany coming up, medical 3D printing conference. Anyway, but this is not this conference was not just about medicine. It was about 3D printing in general, but it was academic research. So I get the impression when I look at the presentations, a lot of these conferences are kind of, some of them are sales pitches. I mean, they're companies and so forth. Folks, and you get a sense of what was coming in 5 years. But one of the conversations had to do with, how soon will it be possible someone comes in the emergency room and within 12 hours they receive a custom implant based on measurements that are taken, and then the prototyping, and then the creation of something that's actually sterile and strong and appropriately light and porous. And I believe they were talking about using Mark Forge, I'm not sure, which I think prints graphite or graphene, a very strong, lightweight system. Anyway, it's very neat. So I'm just going to keep track of time here. We got about 13 minutes to allowing people to come on the board. And now I'm looking at comments here. Joe, seems to be a lot of experimentation necessary and plenty of failures to learn from. What are your favorite resources to avoid common issues? I spend too much time watching YouTube 3D. Okay, so that actually, Dewey provided a bunch of questions that kind of have to do with best practices. If you are, I suppose it might be a little bit different if you're an individual like Joe, or an institution, you want to get into 3D printing, but presumably there's sort of best practices in setting up, choosing machines, setting up workflows. You have something that works for you, a system of the way I believe you described gathering the data using was it Meshworks?
Mesh Mixer.
Mesh model, whatever.
Mesh Mixer.
Mesh Mixer. You had a kind of so I guess I want to focus a little bit more narrowly than Joe, although I think it's relative to this. Tell us a little bit in what's your 3 or 4 step workworkflow that you've executed now a few times that seems to work for you.
I think that's a very interesting question because I hear myself. Okay. It all started, I think, 1 year ago, and because I really have to start at the beginning because it's too funny to talk about. Because let's start. Okay, one of my colleagues, Mike Bemelman, he's a trauma surgeon, and he's already started 3D printing in 2011. He is also a war surgeon, and one of our guys from the one of our soldiers from Afghanistan got injured by booby by a large bomb next to the road, and his foot was totally blown off, and he went to the Netherlands for emergency surgery and to how do you say to heal everything of his leg that was blown off. And actually, his one leg got blown off, and the other leg was a total injured foot. And he asked the surgeon if he could remove that foot because it was so hurting. And the surgeon, Mike Bayman, said, "No, I'm not going to remove the foot. I'm going to try to restore it with help of 3D printing." So he used the first 3D printed model then, but it costed about $1,100, and so in the meanwhile it was very expensive, but the government paid it because it was a soldier. However, in 2016 the models we're making were only, I think, 10 or 15 euros. So then the Mike Bayman said again, okay, so let's try to set up our own 3D lab. So it was only 1 year ago, and so we chose to we did some research in which I'd say which 3D printers were best to use for us, for especially making large for pelvis and chest and stuff like that. And a lot of 3D printers are only capable of printing really small objects, except for example the MakerBot Replicator Z18, the first printer we bought. And this MakerBot came along with a guy, and the guy he was telling us, okay, the whole afternoon, and he said, okay, you have to use this program, you have to use that program, use thingiverse.com, and you can use everything, you can build everything you want. Okay, so we listened to him for about 4 or 5 hours, and after 5 hours, I asked the guy, okay, so now I've learned everything about making fabric models, but what about the medical world? And he said, I have no clue. So, okay, so we had to start all from scratch, because every hospital, I learned one thing, that every hospital has got its own software. And I think there are roughly four problems in hospital 3D printing. The first problem is look what kind of software you have in your hospital. There are two big software companies who are working with the CT or MRI. The first one is Siemens, and the second one is Philips. Two big companies, and they have their own software packages, and all the packages are not the same. Some hospitals buy only a small package. The other hospitals are buying large packages. So you cannot really compare them. You cannot really make it to a uniform workflow. So you have to be very hospital specified to build that software. So the first step is learning what kind of software your hospital has in-house. The second step is after you've done your I'd say the second step is how do you explain that? The second step is learn how to make a 3D reconstruction from the CT with the in-hospital software, and then translate it into an STL file. For me, it took me 4 months to optimize this this part of the workflow, because our hospital is saving the CT files in a general hospital system, but it compresses these files to 3 or 5 millimeter slices. So that means that all these slices are way too thick to build proper 3D models from. And then I learned that the actual 0.6 millimeter slices, or the actual 1.0 millimeter slices from the CT scanners, were only saved for 1 week or 1 month. So that means that if a patient is coming to us, we have to be really quickly. We only have 1 month to get the data from the CT scanner, and then transform it into a 3D reconstruction. Okay, so that's the second step, making a 3D reconstruction. Then the third step was converting it into an STL file. And at first we used a 3D Slicer. It's open source software, but I was not very happy with it because there were a lot of noise around the bones, and it took ages to translate and to translate the CT file into an STL file. And finally, one of our companions from one of our co-workers from the radiology department told me that it was so funny, because she told me that the only thing I had to do with the in-hospital software, the name is Philips IntelliSpace Portal, the only thing I had to do was write with a mouse click on the right side and save as STL file. But no one of the radiologists could tell me this, and the only co-worker was she was working with the CT scan herself. She said it's so obvious, you just put your right mouse click and then save as STL file. Okay, so it took me 1 month to to explore this. So now I had in I think in 2 or 3 months we found out that we how to convert CT into STL, and after that it was very easy, because you've got a lot of open source software such as MeshLab, MeshMixer, and at first we used MeshLab, but it's like a Photoshop 10.0, so it's really difficult, a lot of possibilities, and a lot of medical doctors has little time to do it, because patient care is the first thing you have to do during the day. So the programs has to be have to be as simple as that. And now we're using MeshMixer. It only cost me, I think from A to Z, it cost me now, I think 5 or 10 minutes to create a G code and to put it in the 3D print or in the Ultimaker or in the MakerBot to print the files. So we started, in summary, we started with, I think, 4 hours of working from a CT file to a G code, and now it cost me only 5 or 10 minutes. But that's the problem of in-hospital medical 3D printing, because every hospital has got its own software, and that's the main problem.
There's a question down here, but before we get to it, your 4 steps, your 4 workflow steps, dealing with the software itself, like Siemens or Philips, getting from the CT data to a 3D model. Third step, getting from the 3D model to STL via a slicer. And then the 4th step is what? The generation of the G code, or the actual printing?
I think so. Let's see. The first step is scanning the patient. The second step is converting CT into STL. The first step is scanning the patient. The second step is converting a 2D CT into a 3D CT, so 3D reconstruction seen on a 2D screen. The third step is create a 3D reconstruction into an STL file, and the 4th step is smoothing that STL file with, for example, MeshMixer, and putting it on the print plate using Cura or other programs like Simplify 3D or open source software to convert it into a G code.
Okay, that's good. Thanks. And I asked the same question that Dewey asked, and he just said thanks. Joe Warbington, who in a couple of minutes, Dewey and Joe will be, maybe Manish will be vying for the 3rd position here. But the question is, what are the sterilization challenges with printing large lattice matriced parts? So you think about things that you want, some things that are porous, so that the cellular embedding can occur, so that they're lightweight. But does that sort of add to the sterilization challenge?
No, so we don't sterilize our things, because when I use the 3D printing models, we use it, for example, in a sterilized plastic bag on the operation room, and when I use the surgical guides, or when I prepare the surgical guides, I print it with a commercial company for about 5 or 10 euros, and then I got it back, and then I sterilize it, and then it's good to sterilize. But you definitely, in the normal way in a hospital, you cannot sterilize PLA.
No. But
sorry,
I guess I don't know that. I'm not sure that it was specific to PLA, and that is okay. So when I went to the 3D printing summit, there was on creating implants and balancing strength versus porosity in terms of the internal lattice work, but also creating the kind of surface that allow, once you put once you add the implant, so that the biological tissues can, what's the word, embed themselves with or integrate with. And so I just wonder, that may not be the question that Dewey had, but I just, that it does kind of make me interested. Even the folks that are, I just wonder about, well, I think we're going to move on. We are now to the point, I know that Lars actually has much more he can talk about his presentation in Vancouver. But what I'd like to be able to do is actually invite Joe or Dewey or Manish, and then maybe that would just come out organically, or who knows what will happen next. Is that okay if we invite a guest on, Lars?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. Well, I believe that if you are watching this, that you can ask to be invited on, and whichever person does that first, I'll click on. Or if you want to type into live chat, Joe's in a busy coffee shop. Darn. Well, I mean, Joe, if you have earphones, I've done this kind of thing in busy coffee earphones, and I've also actually done things like taken my laptop and walked outside, and walked around on the sidewalk in a park while I'm on Firetalk, chatting with people. So Dewey is game. So I'm going to go and ask Dewey to come on. And I've talked to Dewey on Firetalk. I think he'll be a good participant. And Dewey, I see you don't have a channel yet. If you have a channel, that means that you can schedule your own Firetalks, and I can follow you. But let's see if we can get Dewey on here. I'm hearing some echo. And I do see you. It's not okay now, Dewey. You're now profile, but say something, Dewey, so we can see how the audio is.
Hi, Dewey.
Audio's pretty good.
Howdy.
Still there, Dewey?
Yes.
Okay. Oh yeah, your audio is very clear. I tell you what, Dewey, either ask Lars a couple questions or make comments, whatever. Take it away.
Well, good to see you guys. I'm interested in things because I'm trying to develop a broad framework for measuring the effectiveness and impact of 3D printing throughout healthcare for all the major categories, including pre-surgical planning using models. I'm really looking forward to one. I just saw the video on the Firetalk while I was waiting for it to show up. There's a video playing, and they were talking about a 3D printed liver where it felt tactily like a real liver, and you could see cancer cells inside of it, and it was like translucent. Excited about technology getting to that level where you could actually see tumors in a soft, pliable thing that looks just like a real organ. That's fascinating. But aside from pre-surgical planning, the implants and prosthesis, I know there was a look I was seeing the other day, bringing back the idea of implanting directly onto the bone with some of this new lattice technology where you can build these meshes that are porous and bone can grow into them. For someone who's got a amputated limb, they could build a stainless steel or titanium extension to the bone out after the spot where they cut it off. It would protrude through the skin, and then they would put the ball joint on the end of that, and the skin would seal around it, and you would actually then have a metal piece that's fused into the bone to attach a limb to, instead of the traditional socket that goes against the skin and causes lesions and sores and discomfort. It would be a more stable joint. All kinds of interesting new applications that way. Of course, solving the problem of where the skin ends and the metal joint sticks out. That's yet to be solved. I'm sure someone will figure it out eventually. But then, of course, aside from that kind of implant. There's pharmaceutical impacts. Was watching something the other day. A guy's very excited about how it's going to transform pharmaceutical industry entirely.
Mhm.
But each of these things, applications for 3D printing, has its own unique challenges. So I'm trying to see where are the universal challenges, and then where are the specific challenges for each use case or area, because a lot of people just assume that whatever the universal challenges are, that's all they have to deal with until they start actually trying to do something, and then realize that there's extra challenges here that somebody doing a completely different thing didn't have. So I guess my question then is, what do you think are your universal challenges that are going to be for 3D printers everywhere? Like you described the software and converting, that's probably a relatively universal challenge. And then what are the specific challenges in what you're doing compared to other people might face completely different challenges for different applications?
Well, thank you for your question. I think you have to divide 3D printing into two parts: the medical 3D printing, the non-academic 3D printing, and the academic 3D printing. And the non-academic 3D printing is 3D printing that's meant to be for all rural hospitals, or all in Holland, as we say, the peripheral hospitals worldwide, because the non-academic 3D printing should be low cost, available for all hospitals. So that means that hospitals can buy the software and a 3D printer for approximately 10 or 50,000 euros. So I think that's the main issue for 3D printing worldwide, that every hospital can integrate its own micro 3D lab to print the basics, such as anatomical models and giveaways for patients, and teaching students, and teaching teaching residents, and teaching surgeons. The other thing is academic 3D printing, and academic 3D printing is totally different, because then you can talk about the surgical guides, you can talk about the titanium printing, and you can talk about bioprinting. In one of our academic centers in the Netherlands is called the University Center Medical University Center of Groningen. And they're already pretty far with bioprinting of of bacteria on the teeth, to prevent holes in the teeth, and to print those bacteria on stuff you can wear in the mouth, so that you're not able to have bacteria in the mouth anymore. But they also do the bioprinting with the small teeth. And I know internationally that 3D printing on academic level they can print already a kidney with stem cells. However, the kidney can stay alive for approximately 1 month. After that, it dies. But it means that the whole donor programs that's set up in Europe and that's set up in the United States can be changed. Because when we can 3D print kidneys, when we can 3D print all the organs, then donors are not needed anymore. And I think that's the level of 3D printing that should be available in all academic hospitals. But it's on a total different level than the 3D printing that, for example, we're doing. But I think you need both of them, because the academic hospitals should focus on the really specific parts and on the really difficult parts of 3D printing and bioprinting and the extreme cases and extreme patient cases. On the other hand, the peripheral hospitals and the rural hospitals, we're treating a lot more patients, and they have to use 3D printing on a daily basis, and that's what I'm striving for, because I really like to see that the 3D printing can be implemented in every hospital. But but to do so, you have to conduct a cost effectiveness study of 3D printing, because a lot of doctors now are saying on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on the newspapers, they're always saying 3D printing can improve the surgical outcome, and it can save surgical time. It's not true. Yeah, it's true. It saves surgical time, but what they don't say is the period of time they have to use to prepare those 3D printing, and you have to compare the time that's needed to prepare the models and the time that's needed to do your surgery, because your surgery can be less. The surgery time can be less, so that it's less expensive. But when you have more expensive preparation, then it's not cost effective. So a lot of surgeons are making conclusions on 1 or 2 or 3 patients, and that's not really scientific improvement of the added value of 3D printing. And I think that there should be a really large study to investigate the cost effectiveness of 3D printing. It's really needed, because otherwise the government and otherwise the hospitals are not going to say, okay, let's try 3D printing, because doctors are only saying now, well, I treated 1 patient and the outcome is great. It's great. We all know it's great, but it's not scientifically proven, and that's the fact that has to be done.
Yeah. On that note, I envision a continuum that someone will be able to use as a yardstick for making decisions. That perhaps you have a surgery where the patient is not in danger of dying immediately. Maybe you have 2 or 3 days. You could schedule the surgery sometime next week, and the patient's health is going to be fine. Then you have plenty of time for planning. In which case you could say, this surgery is going to take 2 hours from first incision to last suture. But if I use 3D printing for modeling to do planning and preparing, I can maybe reduce that to 100 minutes, save 20 minutes on the surgery. But it's going to take 8 hours of printing to get all the models I need, or 15 hours of printing to get all the models I need. So putting that 15 hours of extra prep time ahead of the surgery to save 10 or 20 minutes on the surgery may not be cost effective dollar-wise, but every minute a patient is under anesthesia is a health risk. Every minute that the patient is open on the table is a health risk. So that 20 minutes might be worth it, as long as it's in a case where you can schedule it 2 weeks from now or a week from now. You have plenty of time. But if you have a patient that's going to die if you don't get this surgery in the next 2 hours, you certainly don't have time to wait 12 hours to print a model to help you plan your surgery better. In trauma situations, clearly, you don't have that. But so to make a decision, we build a tool, a framework based on the science, based on actual measurements, where we actually measure how much time is saved, how much improved outcome is improved, how much planning is required, how much printing is required. You get these numbers from looking at actual case studies to build a database of facts and figures that you can then use as a decision model that hospitals will be able to apply to make those surgical decisions on whether or not 3D printing is going to be useful in this case. And every time, is it useful in this case? Should we use 3D printing this time?
Yeah, but a little sidestep, but because we're also doing, I get your point about 3D printing in emergency situations, and until now that's not possible. But you have to see 3D printing as the iPhone 1.0 from 1995. It always can be better. But at the moment we're doing also a lot of research in augmented reality. We've got the Microsoft HoloLens over here, and we put a pelvic fracture on it, and our purpose is to put the pelvic fracture over the patient, to put a layover over the patient, so you can visualize every bone structures and every nerves and every all blood vessels under the skin without operating. So you can do a minimal invasive operation, and that you can actually use for emergency surgery, because then you just, because we're scanning the patient, putting the CT scan, making a 3D reconstruction out of it. It's only it's only 10 or 15 seconds. The 3D reconstruction, put it in your Microsoft HoloLens, and then display the hologram on the injured patient. And then you got your own three-dimensional view, and you can operate the patient within half an hour. So that's a little sidestep, but it will take time until 3D printing can be done while you're waiting. So that's a good point. But you know, you were saying that 3D printing. Sorry, you were saying that every minute on the operation room is 1 minute extra of a possible complication. That's true, but it's really hard. You cannot measure it. So there's you have to measure in either blood loss, or extra complications, or surgical time. And then when you investigate the surgical time, you have to compare the surgical time with the preparation time, and you cannot predict. It's really hard to say. You cannot investigate the amount of minutes that are needed for surgery without complications. I don't know how to explain it, but it's really hard to measure it. And I think you're right, but scientifically you cannot prove that point, because you cannot predict on which minute in which operation a complication will exist.
Right.
And therefore there was a small case series, I think a few weeks ago, here on Twitter, that was saying about the femur. They used a femur, they used a 3D printed femur, I think 5 or 6 or 7, to do the operations with, and I think they operated with a control group, and they operated, I think, 1 hour less than in normal time. Wow, that's a great, of course, that's a great outcome. 1 hour less of operation time. However, they only use 10 patients, so it doesn't say a lot about the actual outcome, because then you need a lot more patients to prove that outcome. But I'm not very. It looks a bit negative how I speak about it, but I like to be realistic, and I think 3D printing, it can be of really added value, but we have to search for the added value. And maybe the 3D printing is not about the added value of less operation time, but I think 3D printing can be of added value for explaining the patients. And you know, I see a lot of patients with pelvic fractures, and the pelvis is a really complex three-dimensional anatomical structure. And when I explain to patients what kind of operation we're doing with help of X-ray and CT, they say, yeah, okay, right, okay, yeah, thank you very much, doctor. But they don't get the point. They don't understand what kind of really difficult fracture we will be treating, and they don't understand why they are not allowed to walk on that feet for 6 weeks, and they don't understand why the rehabilitation time is approximately 1 year. But when I use a 3D printed model of their own fracture, they say, "Wow, okay, now I understand. Is this my real pelvis? Is this my real fracture?" And then I say, "Yes, this is your fracture, and this is what it's all about. And therefore, you cannot walk for 6 weeks, and therefore the rehabilitation time will be 1 year." So maybe 3D printing is not about the less surgical time, but it's about patient satisfaction and surgical confidence and health-related quality of life of patients. Maybe that's what we're looking for, but we still have to investigate that part.
One of the things that I found interesting.
That's right. Lars, we got about 10 minutes left here.
Okay.
folks are welcome to hang around after the hour, but I do kind of want to aim kind of for a wrap up. And I'll give you a little bit of my own motivation here. I'm trying to get the people in the health IT arena more interested in 3D printing. And if you think about such things as like, genetic data and precision medicine, there's a lot of emphasis now of how do you combine kind of workaday electronic health record, clinical data and workflow management systems with the genetic research and the clinical cancer, database, all that, bring that all together. Well, at some point here, you're going to see 3D printing. Also, these 3D printing models are going to deserve to be part of the electronic health record, or at least some larger expanded version of it. I mean, when you review the course of some patient, and so kind of logic. So now I want to kind of zoom back up. So we started out kind of, and then we kind of zoomed in on a lot of very interesting specific stuff. I'm going to give you, so I'd love to be able to clip like the last 5 minutes out of this and stick it on YouTube or whatever, and send it to my health IT friends. And so in order to kind of prime that pump, I've got a list of stuff that I like about 3D, things that have got me excited. Some of them are just headlines. And then we can just kind of, and Dewey, I can't see you, so feel free in a minute or two just to actually say something, because to jump in. But and some of these have been mentioned, or I've seen them on the side here. Joe mentioned them. I've got my own prosthetics project going on from Enable the Future. Inexpensive prosthetics. Bioprinting human organs, healthcare. And Manish mentioned this. There's the healthcare maker movement. Nurses and doctors are now getting inexpensive 3D printers, and they're building things. They're building medical devices, or they're building things to help the patients. Are making things to make their lives easier, like spirometry games for kids with. We've got at this conference that I went to, I was really fascinated by bioreactors, and that is with using microgels and microfluidic technologies. You can create, you can print something, the size like an inch by an inch by an inch square, and seed it with all kinds of genetically changed yeast and nutrients, and you basically and it will just start generating insulin or generating whatever. So what you're actually doing is you're 3D printing a miniature factory that can then generate many kinds of medicine. I think that's kind of fascinating. This idea that I think Dewey touched on, this idea of having stronger but more porous and lightweight surgical implants, kind of interesting. Metal versus graphite. I'm not sure what those are. The idea of 4D printing. So at the summit, they talked about developing vertebra that flexed in the right way. So they're not just rigid, but they had an internal structure, and they're different pieces of the same bone were made from different substances, or from different same substance but with different rigidity in terms of the lattice. So it flexed, and there is well, I'm going to stop there. Kind of looking ahead 5 years and not kind of rehashing what we just went through, which was really good stuff. Lars, do you have some thoughts?
Sorry, you were a little bit hard to understand the last part. Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, just I kind of gave a kind of a list of 7 or 8 things that they're kind of like torn from the headlines. The prosthetics, the organs, the prototyping, doctors, nurses, patients building things with 3D printers. These bioreactors, like just actually printing microgels that actually then can generate pharmaceuticals. creating better implants, lighter weight, more porous. I'm kind of, without going back and talking about what we've already talked, what are some other stuff that excites you that, boy, if you weren't doing what you're doing right now, that you want to get into?
On 3D printing field, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, that's actually quite interesting, because I just started tried printing for third world countries. Is that maybe what you mean? Because
that's an example. Yes.
That's for now it seems like it's only meant to be for first world countries, but I'm actually probably going to Sierra Leone in December, because a friend of mine is working over there as a tropical doctor, and I'm was searching for a project to help people over there with 3D printing, and I'm not. It's not my purpose to start a 3D printing lab from scratch over there, but I really I was wondering if there were already 3D labs and what they are doing and how I could help them. So in Sierra Leone, as you all know, there was a civil war a couple of years ago, and there are still a lot of children who are still a lot of children without hands, because their hands they got wounded by the massive booms and the how do you say, the massive attacks, and there are a lot of children without fingers. So there's a project. It's called Enable, and you can make a 3D printed hand, a low budget prosthetic hand with the Ultimaker. So that's what I'm trying now. I actually 1 hour before this meeting, that's actually one of that's a how do you say, that's an example of the hand I was making, and I put in the first example on my Twitter actually 1 hour before this meeting, so you can take a look if you want to. It's there's a lot of room for improvement, but I really like to see if I can help over there by building up how do you say, by building up a couple of hands and take them with me, or take an old 3D printer with me to leave it over there with the knowledge from people in the Netherlands, to see if we can help them by making very easy how do you say to make it easy for them to build low budget prosthetic hands.
Very good. Like I said, I'm not going to cut us off at the hour. We can talk, but I do kind of want to wrap up here. Dewey, in a minute or two, give me your kind of review of 3D printing, and the future is bright. And then I'll give like the last minute or two, and then that can kind of be the clip. But go ahead, Dewey.
Well, one of the things I've been thinking of in my vision for the future with 3D printing is that I think it will help usher a revolution in how medical care is given to patients in general, whether it's through enabling a global network of telehealth, where patients don't have to go see a doctor in the town they live in. They can online virtually see a doctor halfway around the world who has the right expertise for what they need. And then things like the 3D printing, the patient has to go to the nearest place where he can get an accurate scan, and then that data can become part of his health record, and that scan can be transmitted to whoever has the expertise to convert that scan into an appropriate file that somebody can print the prosthesis he needs, or somebody can print the implant he needs. That this can all be done globally, without borders, without hospital walls, without any of the traditional impediments from bureaucracy, if we have a good information sharing network behind it. And that's where I think the healthcare IT really will play a role in how well this can actually get us to that future point where any person with any problem can go to a facility and get any care they need, whether that particular facility has the capability within its walls or not. You can be able to get seen by a specialist 7,000 miles away. You can get your information sent. You can get your care treatment plan sent. A pharmacy can digitally calculate the exact medical needs you're going to have throughout the course of your treatment, and then your local pharmacy can issue you the components, and you can go home and 3D print your pills every day, or 3D print one pill every day that has all the medications you need throughout the day by engineering time release. All these things will be possible, and most of them are already possible in terms of the printing capability. It's the networking capability that's not up to speed yet, because people haven't anticipated how quickly the 3D printing capabilities would develop. So for me, it's all of it. It's not any one particular piece. The whole system of 3D printing integrating into healthcare, with digital information exchange being the glue that holds it all together.
No, great saying.
Well, thank you, Dewey. Thank you, Lars. I'll kind of do a little wrap up here. Again, I'm going to let the tape run, but in terms of kind of having an official hour-long thing here, we just talked about 3D printing in healthcare with Lars and Dewey. We started kind of at the 30,000-foot level. We zoomed in on some very detailed stuff about issues about sterilization and modeling and patient education, patient experience. And now we just sort of zoom back out, and we've kind of come back to the health IT level. We're currently in the middle of what's called National Health IT Week here in the United States. And I do think that just like genetic data and precision medicine and cancer registry data is all kind of coming together with kind of workaday clinical electronic health record data, I think you're going to see increasingly 3D printing data and actuators. The interaction with printers is going to happen. I'll mention two things. One, that John Shull, who founded Enable the Future, is on Twitter, and JONSULL, very nice fellow, met him a couple times. And what you were talking about, Dewey, I've been watching in the 3D printer world, not in the healthcare world, the increasing sophistication of the software for networking together 3D printers with 3D modeling with groups that are working on various projects. And there's a Twitter account called GrabCAD, RAECAD, GrabCAD. And then there are several other examples out there. And I think that kind of sophisticated stuff is going to be very helpful in healthcare and health IT, and integrating 3D printing into the larger health IT enterprise infrastructure. And finally, I'm just going to allow us to make sure the folks who are watching and are present here, we're on Twitter. I hope we'll continue to interact. Next year, I'll do another fire talk. Who knows? Maybe it'll be part 2 of this. So Lars, what's your Twitter account handle?
My Twitter account is Brouwers_3D. And
spelled BROUWERS. Okay.
Yeah, BROWERS. Yeah.
Dewey, your Twitter account?
I have no idea. I have to look.
Oh, well, it's. I think he kind of made up something kind of flippant, and when he first joined, and I'm stuck with it.
Tom the Dew.
Tom the Dew. THOMTHDEW, I recall. Okay. And I'm Wareflow, WAREFLO, which is sort of like software workflow, kind of a portmanteau. And we've had Joe Warbington here, who just typed his Twitter account, JWARBINGTON. And I'd love to talk to Joe one of these days about intersections between not data coming off of CT machines and so forth, but just actual data about, for example, effectiveness of outcomes of whatever, including 3D printing and surgery, and visualizing that and printing out 3D graphs I think in various ways would be kind of interesting. We've got Manish. Is Manish still present? Manish is, okay, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, M. Sharmas, M-S-H-R-M-A-S. By the way, Manish, sorry about my cough. I've done pretty good. I got a chest cold. Manish, what is your other HCIT experts account? And I don't think we've missed anybody else. There it is, HCIT expert. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm not going to, that's the end of the official National Health IT Week Firetalk. It's the 3rd annual one. Thank you very much, Lars, who showed up. And then I'm going to count 3, 2, 1, pause so I can cut it. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So I'm not going to kick everybody off, but I know you're busy. So unless anybody really wants to stay, I'll let folks go.
I still have 5 or 10 minutes if you like to.
Okay, let's stay. Okay, Joey, Joe.
Well, I do have a question then.
You can see why I was cutting things off, because I have a chest cold.
That sounds pretty good.
I just went on a cruise. I just went on a cruise for a week, up from New York City up to Canada. And you know, anytime you get together in closed space with 2,000 other people, you leave with a cold. So so I've been suppressing that cough now for an hour. Okay. Hey Joe, can you make it on yet? Can you visit us? Or it doesn't matter if it's a noisy background, we'll still let you on, because now we're in that kind of freewheeling, you know, last bit of the tape here. Kick you off, Dewey, and let Joe on?
Sure.
Yeah. Come on, Joe. Even if it's noisy, I want to hear the noise of the coffee shop. You know, there actually is I think it's an app that plays the sounds of noisy coffee shops. So you're working at home, but you really would rather be in a noisy coffee shop. So there's an app that actually live streams. You can like choose, your favorite coffee shop, maybe in Seattle, Washington. Okay, I think Joe might have left. Sadly gone. Okay. So when do you, Lars? When do you arrive in Vancouver?
I will leave on Friday, and I will arrive on Friday as well because of the time difference. And we will first go hiking in Vancouver Island for 4 days from hut to hut, from cabin to cabin.
Wow.
And after that, I will return, and the conference will start, I think, from Wednesday to Saturday or something, or from Thursday to Saturday. It's a 4-day conference, and it's the largest trauma conference worldwide. So a lot of Canadian and American, Northern American doctors will be over there, trauma surgeons, and a lot of people from Southeast Asia and Europe. And I think that it's nice to know that all the doctors from the Netherlands, there's a small delegation from the Netherlands. I think 20 or 30 doctors or something, in a total of 1,000 visitors. But the Dutch doctors are always a little bit different, because our background is a little bit different. Because in the USA, you are a trauma surgeon, or you're a trauma surgeon, or you're an orthopedic surgeon, or an abdominal surgeon. And in the Netherlands, you're just a trauma surgeon. So that means you're treating everything. So this conference is more like the orthopedic part, but we're also treating the vascular major problems, and the abdomen. The abdominal problems. So that means that this conference is only one part of what we're doing at home here in our hospital. But it's a great conference for the orthopedic surgeons. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
Have you been to Vancouver?
Nope.
Have you been to Vancouver?
Nope, not yet. So it should be great.
I've spent quite a bit of time in Vancouver. Let's see. I'm trying to think of the. I'm guessing it's right down at the Pacific Center, or Pacific Pavilion, right on the water across from Grouse Mountain. In the wintertime, right across from downtown. Well, downtown Vancouver's on an island, and then there's a gorgeous park, Stanley Park, which is probably, I think it's the largest public parks, largest city park in the North America. And it's got a kind of a mountain. Anyway, but across from downtown, we've seen the skyline of Vancouver, is Grouse Mountain ski slope. Okay, so you go up on this mountain, and you basically ski down, and you're looking right at this glowing, gorgeous skyline surrounded by water. And then, of course, you can go up there in the summertime and look down and have dinner and look down on it.
I will be there in October, so I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle between two seasons, and it's not summer season, it's not skiing season. So
it's very temperate. Yeah. The hiking is, but if you make it up to Grouse Mountain, it's a great. Just take. There's a you can just take. For $1, you can take a bus all the way up. You take the ferry across, and then the bus all the way up, the Sands Hotel, which is down on Denman, which I believe is Cole Harbor. Is it Cole Harbor? Anyway, it's just there are so many charming places. So many places you can sit and have a nice dinner or a cocktail and watch the sunset on the Georgia Strait, which is basically the northern piece. So going south is Puget Sound by Seattle, but then going north along Vancouver Island. Anyway, beautiful part of the world. I hope you'll tweet some hiking photos.
Let's see.
And yeah, okay. Well,
I think do we so got another question? I think one of the
go ahead. Go ahead and
one of the things I'm struggling with is developing a way to measure the impact of using 3D printed models to explain medical procedures to patients. Well, that's one of the things that's one of the things we're going to measure hopefully in our cost effectiveness study, because of course you have to know your patient's opinion to know if your 3D printed model is cost effective. So there are several questionnaires, not specifically for the 3D printing, but to measure patient satisfaction. And we will use one of them. I'm not sure on top of my head which one we use, but I think PSQ 18 or something. And it's a questionnaire we're using to measure the patient satisfaction, to see if the control group that is informed by the conventional methods, if they are less satisfied or even satisfied as the group who is treating and explaining with help of 3D printed models. So let's see. I'm not sure. And the second question was, I think it can help gain better informed consent and help patients cope with their care plan expectations. But how can we measure that? Yeah, I think so. So I think with the PSQ 18, but there are several questionnaires who will measure the patient satisfaction. But there are several to choose from. Yeah, so I'm not sure which one is right. We will use this one.
Okay, well, Lars, Dewey, it's been great, and I'll see you around the web, and hopefully maybe we can do something similar again in the future.
Yeah, well, Chuck, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for hosting this Firetalk, and let's see if we can put 3D printing on the map on Twitter worldwide. Okay, ciao.